The morning mist clung to the forest like a gentle whisper, veiling the ancient trees in a silvery shroud. A chorus of birds announced the coming dawn as shafts of light filtered through the canopy, dappling the quiet stretch of road that cut through the Southeast Asian wilderness. Ella, the matriarch elephant, moved slowly but with quiet confidence. Her wrinkled, gray skin bore the story of many seasons, monsoons, droughts, the births and deaths of her herd. But none of her life's journeys had been quite like this one. Beside her, small and still uncertain on her feet, trotted Luna, her calf, only a few months old. Luna's ears flapped with curiosity, and her tiny trunk waved at butterflies dancing just above the ground. The two had been moving since dawn, crossing from the deeper jungle to a patch of forest beyond the highway. Ella had done this crossing many times, but Luna had never seen the wide black ribbon of road before. It was strange and silent this early in the morning. The humans called it Highway 7. To Ella, it was just a scar on the land. She hesitated briefly at the road's edge. She reached out her trunk, feeling the vibrations in the earth. Nothing. Still, quiet, safe enough. With a low rumble in her chest, Ella stepped forward. David Carter was on his 15th hour behind the wheel of his delivery truck. The cargo wasn't anything special, mostly medical supplies, bottled water, and a few crates of electronics. His route took him across long distances, from Malaysia to the remote hospitals and villages scattered near the Thai border. He was used to the solitude. After decades of driving, he'd come to love the road more than he loved staying in one place. There was a rhythm to it, engine humming, tires whispering against the asphalt, trees blurring by in greens and browns. David had grown up in Australia, but Southeast Asia had become his second home. He admired the land, the culture, and especially the people, always generous, always kind. As he neared a bend in the forest road, David reached over to adjust the volume of the radio. A folk song from a local station filled the cabin, soft and nostalgic. He didn't see the elephants right away. Ella had almost made it across. Luna, prancing playfully behind her, paused at the center of the road to examine a brightly colored piece of plastic, discarded food wrapping. She didn't notice the distant sound of an approaching engine. She didn't notice Ella's sudden stop and the deep, warning trumpet from her mother. But David did. Too late. As he rounded the curve, the early light caught something massive and gray standing in the middle of the highway. He slammed on the brakes. The tires screamed. The truck veered. But inertia is a cruel god. And the truck could not stop in time. There was a sickening crunch. A thunderous crash. And then, silence. When David opened his eyes, everything was sideways. The world had tipped. The windshield was shattered. The air smelled of diesel and burned rubber. A sharp pain stabbed through his side. He tried to move and realized he was pinned, his leg trapped under the twisted metal of the dashboard. Then he heard it, a sound he had never heard before, a low, mournful wail, so filled with sorrow it shook him to his core. He turned his head. Through the ruined windshield, he saw the calf lying motionless on the road. Ella was still standing. Her ears flared. Her eyes, dark and wide, locked onto David. Her breath came in heavy puffs, fogging the morning air. She moved toward the truck, slow and deliberate. David's heart pounded. He couldn't tell if she was going to charge. He raised his hand weakly. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracked. "I didn't see her." Ella stopped inches from the wreckage. Her massive form loomed like a mountain. Her trunk reached forward, not to strike, but to touch Luna's still body. She nudged her gently, again and again. No response. A low rumble echoed in Ella's chest. Grief. Then she turned back to David. She didn't strike. She didn't roar. She just stood, breathing deeply, as if trying to understand what had happened. The hours passed like thick syrup. Eventually, help arrived, local forest rangers. Alerted by passing motorcyclists, a crane came to lift the truck. Paramedics pried David free. He screamed as his leg was moved, but never lost consciousness. He asked, over and over, "Is the baby okay?" No one answered. Ella had refused to leave. She stood guard over Luna's body, her massive frame unmoved by trucks, men, or noise. The rangers kept a respectful distance. They knew this was not a creature to be forced. One of them, a young woman named Suri, knelt beside David as he was stretchered into the ambulance. "You didn't mean to," she said quietly. "It's not your fault." David's eyes welled with tears. "But I did. I took her from her." Suri looked toward Ella and nodded solemnly. "She knows. But she doesn't blame you." "Not really." The sun rose higher, casting golden fingers of light across the scene of devastation. The forest, once alive with the morning songs of birds and insects, had gone still. Even nature held its breath. Ella stood motionless over Luna. The calf's small, still body lay crumpled on the roadside. Her soft brown eyes closed as if merely sleeping. Ella's massive frame loomed above her daughter protectively. Her wrinkled ears spread wide in silent vigilance. From time to time, she lowered her trunk to gently nudge Luna's side. A silent, desperate plea for her to wake up. There was no answer. Still, Ella stayed. Her instincts warred within her. The scent of oil and smoke made her wary. The twisted metal of the truck groaned in the heat. An alien, dangerous presence, but something deeper, older, held her in place. Luna's scent, her warmth, now fading. Ella's bond with her calf was unbreakable, even in death. Then, she noticed him, the human, the one from the truck. He lay slumped in the wreckage, bloodied and barely moving, but alive. His eyes, blue, frightened, and filled with tears, met hers. He did not yell. He did not struggle. He simply looked at her the way a creature looks when it knows it has done something terrible but cannot undo it. Ella flared her trunk slightly, catching his scent. Pain, fear, guilt. She had every reason to hate him. He had taken her child. But something about the way he lay there, broken, helpless, suffering, touched something ancient in her heart. Elephants knew grief. They knew suffering. And Ella, despite everything, was not driven by rage. She rumbled low in her chest. A sound of sorrow. not aggression. Then, slowly, she stepped toward the truck. David froze. He could barely breathe from the pain in his side. And now this massive creature, grieving, unpredictable, was approaching him. He braced himself for the worst. But Ella did not raise her trunk to strike. She did not charge. She simply stood beside the wreck, close enough that he could feel the heat of her body, see the patterns of dried mud on her skin. She looked at him, and for a moment, the world fell away. David whispered hoarsely, "I'm sorry, I didn't see her." Ella's ears twitched. She stepped back and returned to Luna, her great body blocking the sun once more. She leaned down, placing her trunk gently along the calf's side, and stood like that, silent, still, until the sound of engines broke the spell. The Rangers arrived cautiously, weapons lowered, expressions grim. The lead ranger, Pac Aaron, had seen this kind of thing before: animals wandering across roads, humans moving too fast to stop, tragedy in slow motion. But this was different. He raised his hand for the others to stay back as he observed the scene. Ella wasn't lashing out. She wasn't retreating. She was waiting. "Don't approach her," he warned the others. "She's in grief. Give her space." A young volunteer named Suri moved toward David. "He's alive," she called. "His legs pinned. We need the cutting tools and a stretcher." They worked carefully, cutting through the mangled metal while Ella watched from only a few meters away. Any sudden noise, any careless movement, and she could have charged. But she didn't. As David was pulled from the truck, he cried out in pain. Ella's ears flared, and she let out a deep, guttural groan. The Rangers flinched, but she didn't move. Instead, she turned back to Luna and gently curled her trunk around the calves. It was her goodbye. Hours later, after Luna's body had been respectfully removed from the road and the truck towed away, Ella still stood there. She wouldn't follow the Rangers. She didn't retreat into the jungle. She remained beside the spot where Luna had fallen. Pac Aaron finally approached her alone, carrying a bundle of bananas and jackfruit leaves. He laid them on the ground a few feet away. "We'll wait with you," he said softly. "Take your time." The Rangers and volunteers sat nearby, silent, watching. Ella eventually moved to the offering. She touched the bananas with her trunk but did not eat. Instead, she picked up a leaf and carried it to where Luna had lain. She placed it on the ground. A ritual of sorts. Her way of mourning. It was nearly sunset before she turned back toward the forest. No one followed her. David woke 3 days later in a rural hospital. His leg was fractured, 3 ribs broken, and his right shoulder dislocated. But he was alive. What hurt most, though, wasn't physical. "I killed her," he told Suri, who had come to visit. "I killed that baby." Suri shook her head. "No, you were driving slow. It was just bad timing." She darted out. "You didn't have a chance. I should have done something differently. Swerved harder, hit the brakes sooner. You'd be dead," she said gently. "Maybe both of you." David fell silent. Outside his window, he could hear birds. He closed his eyes, remembering the look in Ella's eyes. She hadn't hated him. That was the hardest part. He would have deserved it. She forgave me, he whispered. Maybe, Suri replied. Or maybe she just saw that pain recognizes pain. Months passed. David recovered slowly, but the emotional wounds clung to him. He couldn't return to the road right away. He stayed in the village, helping the forest rangers, learning about elephant migration, road safety measures, and wildlife corridors. He became an advocate, working with Pakaran to install warning signs, speed bumps, and nighttime sensors along the highway. He spoke at town meetings, told his story with raw honesty. I didn't expect to be saved by the animal I thought I'd wronged. He'd often say, and always, when he spoke of Ella. His voice broke slightly. She knew I was hurt too. That's what makes her a mother. That's what makes her more human than most of us. Ella returned to the forest. She did not rejoin her herd for many weeks, choosing instead to roam alone, retracing the paths she once took with Luna. Rangers would sometimes spot her near the highway, standing at the edge of the trees, silent. She never crossed again, but one morning, Suri saw her among a herd once more, older now, slower, but still strong, and beside her, nestled close, was another calf, a newborn. Life, as it always does, had found a way. Epilogue. Years later, a small memorial stone was placed by the side of Highway 7, near the curve where Luna had died. On it, carved in both English and Thai, were these words: "In memory of Luna, may we learn to share this earth with those who walk beside us in silence." David never forgot. Ella never returned to that spot. But their lives had changed each other's forever. The morning sun crept higher over the jungle canopy, casting long shadows over the broken remains of the accident. Hours had passed since the crash, but Ella still lingered nearby, her powerful frame silhouetted against the golden light. She had stayed with Luna's body until the stillness became unbearable. Now, her instinct whispered something else, something deeply unnatural for an elephant, yet undeniable: help, not for herself, not for Luna, but for the human, the wounded one still trapped in the wreckage. Barely breathing, her massive ears twitched at the sound of rustling in the brush. Her trunk lifted to test the air, and her feet shifted softly on the ground. There was movement along the narrow road that cut through the forest. Two figures. People. Emily Brooks was on her way to the nearby village school, a satchel of worn textbooks bouncing at her side. A British expatriate. She had lived in Thailand for 3 years and had grown accustomed to forest life, though nothing about this morning felt routine. Beside her walked Jack Walker, a local forest ranger and childhood friend. They were deep in conversation about elephant corridors, something Jack was passionate about. He had spent years studying the migratory patterns of the local herds and advocating for safer road crossings. Suddenly, Emily stopped in her tracks. Ahead, a large shape emerged from the foliage near the road. "Jack," she whispered. "Is that?" "It's an elephant," he said quietly, eyes narrowing. "Female, and alone." They both froze. Ella stepped slowly into full view, her body caked in dust and streaked with streaks of dried sap and mud. Her eyes, though small in proportion, gleamed with something intelligent, something intentional. She didn't trumpet, she didn't charge. Instead, she paused a few meters from them and lifted her trunk, not high in threat, but forward, as if gesturing. "What's she doing?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Jack was already watching closely. "She's not being aggressive. She's trying to communicate." Ella turned, took a few steps back toward the road, then looked over her shoulder. "Did she just look back at us?" Emily said in disbelief. "She's leading us," Jack whispered. "My God, she wants us to follow her." They hesitated only a moment before they followed her cautious, lumbering pace. Ella walked slowly, glancing back frequently to make sure they were keeping up. Her movements were purposeful, uncharacteristic of wild elephants. The deeper they moved along the road, the stronger the scent of diesel and burning rubber became. The breeze carried with it something else too: pain, grief, and the metallic tang of blood. Then they saw it. The wreckage lay twisted along the shoulder of the highway. The transport truck crumpled like a toy. Smoke still curled faintly from the engine. And lying on the road beside the forest line, barely visible under a thin layer of leaves and dirt, was the small body of a calf. Emily stopped short, her hand to her mouth. "Oh, no." Jack exhaled sharply. "That must be her baby." They turned to Ella, who had halted a few paces away. She stood still, eyes fixed on the wreckage, breathing deep and slow. Her body was tense, but not in fear. It was grief. Then Emily spotted him. "There's someone in the cab," she cried. "He's alive. I can see his hand." Jack rushed forward, carefully navigating the bent frame of the truck. He could see the driver, unconscious, pale, but breathing faintly. His leg was pinned under the dashboard, his head resting at an awkward angle. "We need to call emergency services," Jack said, reaching for his radio. "He doesn't have much time." Emily turned back to the elephant. "She brought us here," she said softly. "She knew we could help." Ella remained where she was, watching, waiting. Within minutes, forest rangers and paramedics arrived. Alerted by Jack's call, the area was secured, and rescue teams moved swiftly. Chainsaws screamed through the air as metal was cut away from David's body. He stirred once, groaning in pain, and the paramedics moved faster. Ella didn't budge. She stood just beyond the line of rangers, her eyes locked on the man she had brought help for. Every time the noise grew loud or sparks flew from the cutting tools, she tensed, but she did not interfere. "She's not leaving until he's safe," Emily observed. Jack nodded. "She's acting like a witness or a guardian. She doesn't want another life lost today." David was finally freed from the wreckage, lifted onto a stretcher, and loaded into the waiting ambulance. As it pulled away down the road, Ella followed it with her gaze. Then, slowly, she walked to where Luna's body still rested under a covering of banana leaves the rangers had gently placed. She stood over her calf one final time. Then, with deliberate motion, she raised her trunk high and let out a long, echoing trumpet, not of fear, but of farewell. In the days that followed, Word of Ella's astonishing behavior spread throughout the region. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Elephant leads humans to save injured driver," and "Mother's instinct saves a life." Wildlife biologists, conservationists, and behavioral experts all weighed in, many calling it one of the most extraordinary examples of cross-species empathy ever recorded. But for Emily, Jack, and the forest rangers who had witnessed it firsthand, no explanation was necessary. They had seen the truth in her eyes. Weeks later, David returned to the forest. His leg was still in a brace, and he walked with a cane. But he was alive, and grateful beyond words. He met with the rangers, thanked the rescue team, and asked if anyone had seen Ella since. "She was spotted near the river 2 days ago," Jack said. "Still alone. I need to see her." David said, "I don't know why, but I need to." They drove out early the next morning, guided by footprints and scattered dung piles. Eventually, they found her. Ella was near a watering hole, standing quietly under a banyan tree. She didn't react when the jeep approached, but her ears twitched when David stepped out. He limped forward, slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. He said nothing for a long while. Then he placed something on the ground, a single yellow flower, tied with a ribbon. "For Luna," he whispered. Ella didn't approach. She didn't need to. She stood still, a quiet presence under the trees. And David knew, somehow, that she remembered. Epilogue. A year later, the forest reserve where Ella lived was officially designated a protected wildlife corridor. Speed bumps and elephant crossing signs were installed along the road. Motion sensors and warning lights were added. Fewer trucks took that route now. Emily and Jack continued their work in the region, using Ella's story as a teaching tool for local schools and international conservation groups. And David, now retired, remained in the village. He became a volunteer ranger, helping monitor elephant populations and teaching drivers how to coexist with the animals whose lands they passed through. But sometimes, early in the morning, he'd walk to the spot near the watering hole with a flower in hand. And every now and then, when the wind was just right, he'd see her, Ella, the great matriarch, lifting her trunk high to the sky. Not in warning, but in peace. Emily Brooks's hands trembled as she dialed the emergency number on her satellite phone, her thumb fumbling over the keypad. Beside her, Jack Walker was already pulling out road flares from his bag to warn oncoming vehicles. Behind them, the forest was thick and silent, as if it too were holding its breath. "She's injured," Emily told the dispatcher, her voice shaking. "The elephant calf. And there's a man. He's trapped in the truck. We need medical and wildlife teams." Now, on the far side of the road, Ella stood beside her fallen calf. Her immense body curved gently around the tiny form of Luna. She didn't move as Emily spoke. She didn't threaten. Her only sound was the occasional low, guttural rumble, a mother's mournful hum that vibrated through the earth like thunder in the distance. "She's waiting," Jack said quietly, watching Ella. "She's trusting us." An hour later, the first rescue vehicles arrived. The unmistakable sound of helicopter blades began to rise in the east as a medical transport hovered near the clearing. From it emerged Dr. Michael Hayes, a seasoned wildlife veterinarian known across Southeast Asia for his work with elephants, tigers, and bears. He jumped from the chopper before the rotors had even stopped turning. "Where's the injured calf?" he asked as he grabbed his medical kit. "And the man? The driver's inside the truck." Emily pointed. "Unconscious but breathing. The calf is over there. With the mother. She brought us here." Dr. Hayes's gaze turned toward Ella. And for a long moment, he just stared. There was awe in his expression. And something else, reverence. "She's not behaving like a typical wild elephant," he murmured. "That's remarkable. Be careful," Jack said. "She's grieving, but she's calm." Hayes nodded. "Then let's not give her a reason to stop being calm." While emergency medics worked swiftly to extract David from the truck's mangled cab, Dr. Hayes approached Ella with caution. He walked alone, his hands raised, speaking in a slow, soothing tone, not in English, but in Thai, words Ella would not understand literally, but perhaps feel through tone. "We're here to help," he said. "We'll try to save her." Ella turned her massive head slightly toward him. Her eyes, dark, intelligent, ancient, did not narrow in suspicion or widen in panic. She simply watched, step by careful step. Dr. Hayes moved closer to the calf. Luna was still breathing, but barely. Her breaths were shallow, rapid, and her side had a deep gash along the ribs. One hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. Dr. Hayes crouched low and began his preliminary assessment. Behind him, Ella shifted slightly. She exhaled loudly. He paused, turning to her. "I won't hurt her," he whispered. "You brought us here for this." She did not interrupt. With practiced hands, Dr. Hayes applied a topical antiseptic to Luna's wounds, then injected her with a mild sedative to reduce her pain. An assistant handed him tools and medication as a portable stretcher was assembled nearby. "She'll need to be transported," Hayes said. "The leg may be broken. We won't know how badly until X-rays." "Can we do that with the mother so close?" asked Emily. Dr. Hayes didn't take his eyes off Ella. "Only if she lets us." Meanwhile, the rescue crew was making progress with David. Hydraulic tools had cut through the wreckage, and paramedics gently lifted him onto a stretcher. He moaned softly as they stabilized his spine and began oxygen support. One of the medics looked up. "We've got him. He's critical but stable." Ella's ears flicked toward the sound. She didn't move from Luna's side, but she turned her head briefly to watch the paramedics carry David toward the medevac helicopter. Her gaze lingered as the aircraft rose into the sky, then disappeared above the trees. Then she turned back to Luna and lowered her trunk, touching her calf's cheek tenderly. With the stretcher now assembled, Dr. Hayes faced his greatest challenge: moving Luna without terrifying Ella, or provoking her. "She's going to panic when we lift the calf," said one of the wildlife rangers. "Not if we include her in the process," Dr. Hayes replied. "She has to see that we're not taking Luna away forever. Just to help." He stood and addressed Ella once again. "We have to take her. Just for a little while. We'll do everything we can." They moved slowly, placing straps around Luna's small body. Ella took a step forward and let out a low, questioning trumpet. Dr. Hayes stepped back, bowing slightly. The team froze. But Ella didn't charge. She stepped closer to her calf, leaned down, and, astonishingly, nudged one of the straps into place with her trunk. Emily gasped. "She understands," Jack whispered. "She's helping." With Ella's cooperation, the team carefully lifted Luna onto the stretcher and began moving her toward a waiting transport truck retrofitted with a mobile treatment unit. Ella followed, keeping a close but respectful distance. Never once threatening the humans. Never once making a sound of distress. Inside the transport unit, Dr. Hayes worked tirelessly as they drove toward the Wildlife Rescue Center. Ella walked behind the truck the entire way. The journey was slow, deliberate. Whenever the vehicle paused for terrain or rest, Ella stood patiently nearby, swaying slightly, her eyes always on the rear doors. She never made a sound, but her presence was felt by everyone. The forest rangers cleared roads ahead. Farmers and villagers stepped aside as the strange convoy moved through the countryside, a truck with a baby elephant inside. And behind it, the mother, walking calmly through the dust. At the rescue center, Luna was brought to a shaded treatment enclosure, specially constructed for young elephants in recovery. Her vitals were monitored constantly. Her leg was set in a brace. Antibiotics were administered, and Ella was given space just outside the walls. At first, she stood unmoving, unwilling to leave the gate. So the staff brought her water, food, soft leaves and sugarcane, but she refused all of it. Only when they brought Luna out on a stretcher to the open courtyard, where Ella could see her, did she finally relax. She reached her trunk through the fence, brushing gently against her calf's ear. Luna stirred slightly. Her eyes blinked open for just a second. A low rumble passed between them, almost like a conversation. "She's going to fight," Hayes said, watching them, "because her mother's still here." Over the next weeks, Ella remained at the rescue center. Though she was technically wild, the staff began to treat her like family. They built a shade hut for her, kept fresh fruit and herbs nearby, and allowed her to see Luna twice a day. Each time, she would rumble softly. Each time, Luna responded a little more, lifting her trunk, twitching her ears, shifting her feet. Every ranger, vet, and volunteer who witnessed it was changed. Epilogue. 3 months later, Luna took her first steps on her healing leg, wobbly, unsure, but upright. Ella was there, standing quietly, watching. She did not interfere. She didn't trumpet or dance. She simply watched, breathing steadily. Dr. Hayes smiled and leaned on the gate. "That's a mother who knew what had to be done," he said, "and she trusted us to do it." David, now fully recovered, visited soon after. He stood outside the enclosure, staring at Luna and Ella in silent reverence. "She brought you to me," he told Ella softly, "then she let us help her too." Ella turned, looking at him with calm eyes. Then, With a slow nod of her great head, she turned back to Luna. Final note: Ella and Luna were eventually released back into the protected forest corridor, which had been expanded due to international donations raised from their story. New warning systems, overpasses, and wildlife patrols now guard the route where Luna once fell. Their story became a symbol of cross-species trust and a testament to the quiet, powerful intelligence of the elephant heart. And every so often, deep in the forest, rangers still hear two soft rumbles, low, echoing, and full of memory, carried by the wind. The morning after the operation, the forest around the wildlife center was still. A blanket of dew shimmered on the grass, and the air was filled with the faint chirping of birds and the gentle rustling of trees swaying in the warm breeze. Inside the small recovery enclosure, a miracle was unfolding. Luna stirred. Her ears twitched first, then her trunk lifted slightly, swaying in the air as if reaching for something she couldn't yet see. Her breathing grew stronger, deeper, and then, her eyes blinked open. She was alive. The young calf lay nestled on a soft bed of straw and leaves, her broken leg gently supported by a padded brace. She tried to rise, but pain kept her still. Instead, she raised her trunk again, this time seeking out the scent she had known since birth. A sound vibrated through the air, low and warm. Ella answered her daughter's awakening with a rumble so deep it passed through the soil. She pressed her trunk against the enclosure's outer wall, as close as she could reach. And Luna, still groggy from sedatives and pain, leaned her own trunk in return. Mother and child, reunited by hope. Dr. Michael Hayes stepped back from the enclosure, tears glistening in his eyes. "She made it," he whispered. "She made it through." Beside him, Emily Brooks and Jack Walker stood hand in hand, silent witnesses to a miracle forged not just by medicine, but by love. David Carter woke to sunlight pouring into the hospital room. His chest still ached, and his leg was wrapped in a brace. But he was alive, and conscious for the first time in days. The first voice he heard was Emily's. "You're safe, David," she said gently. "You've been through a lot." He blinked slowly, then tried to speak. "The elephant. The baby." Emily smiled. "They're both alive. Luna's in recovery, and her mother hasn't left her side." David turned his head, tears forming in his eyes. "She brought you to me." "Yes, she did," Emily replied. "She walked out of the forest and led us to the truck. She waited while we helped you. She never once tried to hurt anyone." David let out a long breath. "She had every reason to. But she didn't." "No," Emily said. "She chose empathy." 2 weeks later, Luna was strong enough to be moved. Under the guidance of Dr. Hayes and a team of conservationists, the young elephant was carefully transported to a nearby sanctuary, the Changsayan Elephant Refuge. Nestled in the green hills of northern Thailand, the sanctuary, surrounded by protected forest and natural water sources, was built to care for orphaned or injured elephants. Luna would not be alone. Ella followed the transport the entire way, as she had before, never once falling behind. When the gates to the new enclosure opened, She stepped forward first, checking every inch before letting Luna enter. The rangers watched as the two settled under the shade of a tamarind tree. Resting side by side. "They've earned this peace," Jack said softly. Emily nodded. "And they're giving us something too, proof that connection goes beyond species." Meanwhile, David's story, their story, had begun to spread. It started with a blog post written by Emily titled, "The Elephant That Saved a Man," accompanied by Jack's photos of Ella standing over the wreckage and video footage of Luna's rescue. The story captured hearts across the world. News agencies picked it up. Major outlets, BBC, CNN, NHK, Al Jazeera, ran in-depth features. Conservation groups called it one of the most extraordinary displays of animal intelligence ever witnessed. A headline from National Geographic read, "An elephant's mercy. A mother's act of compassion crosses species." Within weeks, donations poured into wildlife rescue centers across Southeast Asia. Roadway improvement projects were greenlit. International petitions demanded new protections for elephant migration routes. Schoolchildren from Germany to Japan sent hand-drawn cards to the sanctuary. Many addressed simply to Ella and Luna. David, now walking with a cane and determined not to return to long-haul trucking, gave his first public interview from the sanctuary itself. "I was a stranger to her," he told the reporter. "She saw the wreck. She saw I was hurt. And instead of running or attacking, she asked for help. She led people to me. I'll never be the same." The interviewer asked him if he feared her that day. "I feared myself more," he replied. "I feared what my species had done. But Ella, she taught me forgiveness." In the sanctuary, Luna slowly regained her strength. Her leg healed with time. And soon she was learning to walk steadily again. Her caretakers introduced her to other orphaned calves. And though she remained closest to her mother, she began playing, splashing in the mud, and chasing butterflies like any young elephant should. Ella, though older, adapted gracefully to her new home. She never strayed far from her daughter and often stood watch under the moonlight. Her eyes always scanning the forest edge, never fearful, only aware. She had seen what the world could do. But she had also seen what it could become. Months later, a ceremony was held at the sanctuary. Officials, conservationists, and villagers gathered to unveil a carved stone monument placed at the sanctuary's entrance. On it were etched these words, "In honor of Ella and Luna, for showing us that compassion is not bound by species, and that a mother's love can reach beyond fear, beyond instinct, beyond understanding." David was there, standing beside Emily and Jack, his hand resting on the cane he no longer needed most days. He looked out at the field, where Ella and Luna stood grazing peacefully, and felt something shift inside him, something deep, permanent, not guilt, not grief, gratitude. In time, the story of Ella and Luna would become part of school curriculums, conservation campaigns, and even animated films. But the people closest to it, those who had seen Ella's eyes, heard Luna's soft rumble, and watched the bond between them, never saw it as a fairy tale. It was a reminder A reminder that intelligence is not just measured by speech or technology, but by kindness, by connection, by the quiet courage to trust another species in a moment of heartbreak. Ella had made a choice that day. And in doing so, she changed lives, saved one, and helped ignite a movement. Final reflections. At sunrise, on the one-year anniversary of the crash, David returned to the forest road where it had all begun. The highway had been repaved and newly protected, lined with wildlife corridors and warning signs. At the curve where his truck once lay twisted, a sign now stood, "Elephant Crossing. Drive with respect. Life shares the road." He placed a small offering of bananas and sugarcane at the roadside. Then sat quietly, listening to the forest. Birds called from above. A breeze whispered through the trees. And far in the distance, barely audible, came the sound of a low, echoing rumble. David smiled. "Thank you, Ella."
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.